This is a prop. When I get scared, I'm going to sit down in it. Right here, I'll do that. I'll waste some more time. I don't know. Potluck and garment sale. Okay, happy Mother's Day. And I was in preparing for this, I kept watching the weather, and it was supposed to be 70 or 80 degrees today, and it's not going to get to the 80s. So maybe we'll get one more day of spring before we get winter, or I mean, a hot summer on Monday. It's supposed to be in the 80s again. So we have to do that. But I was asked to talk about power and community. I'm not going to. I'm going to talk about mothers, and eventually I'm going to talk about my mother, because that's the mother I know best. But when I was preparing for this thing, I began to think about, well, what about the Divine Mother? And I actually, in all the research I've ever done for these talks, I had never read anything where Charles Fillmore actually said that there was a Divine Mother aspect and a Divine Father aspect in unity. So I did what I do. I went downstairs and got the concordance, and I want to inform you that in truth, unity believes that there is a Divine Mother and a Divine Father. So that's really good, because it's really important that I have come to the conclusion that our mothers are the embodiment of the Divine Mother on earth here. They're the heart and light, and heart, light, and love, as Linda Lightfoot used to say. And so all these things, this divine aspect, this of the heart being represented by our mothers, and the love being represented by our mothers. It's a real blessing to know that that's true, and that we're not lost in this thing by ourselves, that indeed we do have a mother, heavenly mother and father. As I was thinking about that, and thinking about my mother in this process, I did some family research. That means I talked to my little brother. We had two different mothers. Well, as Janine would say, that was a joke. We had the same mother, but our experiences were quite different. Yet he remembered things that I did not remember about Mom, and I remembered things that he did not remember about Mom. My mother was a difficult woman. She was. And I recently, where are those? Oh, there they are. Recently, when I was looking through some things to send to my daughters and my nieces and nephews, I found this picture of my mother. And I blew it up. It was just a tiny little picture, little wallet size thing. So I blew it up, and I look at this, and I'm going to share these with you. I'm going to let you pass one down. When you look at them, please take a good look at my mother's face and her surroundings, because I think it gives you an idea of who my mother is or was. So please take your time. You've seen it before. Like I said, my mother was a difficult woman. She was very, very strong in some ways. Incredibly strong. She was born in February 18th in 1923. She would have been 100 years old today, this year. She was, that picture is, I didn't mention that. She's only 10 years old in that picture. So think about that. She's only 10 years old. Anyway, she was born in West Texas during the Depression. And as soon as the Depression was semi over, they decided that they should have something more tragic in the South. They had the Dust Bowl. And things she told me about that was that they were better off on the farm than the people in town. You know, they had a garden and they had animals, but they were better off. I've tried to, when you look at that picture, you're going to see that it's, in some ways, it's almost barren. There's no real life in it. There's no life in her eyes. There's no life in the ground around her. And I think that truly affected her. You know, by the time she was, you know, I don't know, was fairly young, maybe, I'm not sure about this part of my mother's life, but her mother left the family and went to town to take care of older people to make some money. She never came back. And my little brother and I were trying to figure out why didn't she do that? And we knew that Ferd Henderson was a bit of an alcoholic, and evidently he was mean alcoholic. But he was a great guy when he wasn't drunk. But like most alcoholics, that doesn't last all that long. So I don't know if my grandmother left him because he was an alcoholic and divorced him, or actually he died. But in any case, after his passing, she remarried a man named Mr. Scrimshire and took her three girls to Odessa, Texas, where my mother eventually graduated from high school. Mr. Scrimshire was a builder, if I'm not mistaken, and he provided a great life for my mother and her sisters during that part of their life. But about the time she graduated from high school, World War II started. And she and her younger sister moved to San Diego, California. I don't know if it was for the sailors or for work, but after my mother passed and we were looking through her things, we found out that my mother had been married 3 times. The first guy we had never heard about. So that was kind of interesting. Then she married my father and had 4 children, excuse me, forgot my brother, my older brother. Sometimes he's easy to forget. He was a lot like my mother. In any case, she remarried after my father was killed in a car accident, or as a result of a car accident, when I wasn't even 3 years old yet. My younger brother was barely 2. And she married a man who eventually got a job with the Corps of Engineers, and we got to move all over the country and see the world. And we became missile kids. My stepfather shot Polaris and located the sites for every Minuteman missile in this part of the country, in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And so he would go, we would move, he would go out with the rest of the men on his crew and locate these positions. And we just got to move a lot. I went to 18 different schools, 18 different schools, I think. And if you count the times moving from town to town, or from one house or one trailer to another place, it was something like 32 times. So it was very interesting growing up and moving around like that. When my mother got older and we all had left home and things, she did very well. She managed to become a full-fledged probation officer for the state county of Ventura County in California. She did really well. However, before she passed, as many of you know, she was diagnosed with dementia. And I've said my mother was difficult, right? So when it came time to somebody take care of her, I was the only volunteer. The rest of them could not or would not or not capable of doing it at that time. So I went and got my mother. And when she first got here, she was pretty lucid. She did pretty well. She was able to follow conversations and be present with us. And that was really nice. However, she really was still herself. And when my children, after my divorce and I'd married Louise, the girls were with us, and Mom was there one day, and she spoke to them the way she spoke to me my entire life. And after I took my children home to their mother, I came home to my mother, and I told her in no uncertain terms that she was never, ever to speak to my children the way that she spoke to me. I didn't expect that to change for me, but I was absolutely never going to have her speak to my children that way. It was a very, very hard thing to do. Unfortunately, I was extraordinarily angry when I did it. And I am truly ashamed of myself for not being able to do it differently. I tried to talk to my mom after that, and it was very, very difficult. I went outside when she was smoking her cigarette underneath the apple tree, and she just wouldn't engage with me. She wouldn't have anything to do with me. And I was trying so hard to make amends for my behavior. But this is Mother's Day. And this is not the end of the story. This is not the end of the story. I am pretty sure that those of you whose parents grew up in the Depression and things have similar stories of their having to work just to keep their children fed. You know, I think about my mother, and I never went to school hungry. I never went to school dirty. I never slept in the park under a tent or in a shelter. I always had a roof over my head. But I never, ever heard her say she loved me. And I think about that now, and I think about my own children and how much I love them and how little they can't do anything to stop me from loving them. I just can't believe that isn't just one of the strongest feelings in the world, that we just love our children and our mothers love us. Yet I think my mother's upbringing and all of that desperateness of her life as a child, where did the food come from, who was going to eat, who wasn't going to eat, all those things stole from her the ability to do much other than go to work, feed the kids, pay the bills. She just wasn't present in the other ways. So that night, my mother was getting dressed, and my wife Louise was helping her get dressed. And I came in and I sat down on the corner of one of the single beds that were in that room. And we had a conversation. I can't tell you any of the words, really. But at one point, my mother looked at me and said, "Well, you have known I've always loved you. And I looked at her and answered, no, I have never known that you love me. And this woman, in her dementia, stood up, prop time, stood up, walked across the room, put her arm on my shoulder, and held me the best she could while I wept. For those of you who have not seen me cry, I am an ugly crier. I cry big, I cry lots of tears. My nose gets completely full of boogers. Don't ask me where they come from. But I wept and wept and wept and wept until there were no more tears. No more tears. Then I looked at my mother and I said, can I hold you now? And my mother sat on my lap, put her head on my shoulder, and I rocked her as if she were my child. And in those moments, all that other stuff that I told you about, all that stuff that I didn't know that my mother loved me, filled me as I rocked this old woman. And I held her until we were done. Now I realize that every time we moved, every time I went to school, every meal I ate, when the little girls in 8th grade looked at me and said, you're wearing the same clothes you wore yesterday. And I said, no, I'm not. This is my clean black sweatshirt. I wore my blue one yesterday. And these are my blue jeans. I wore my black ones yesterday. These are clean. She taught me to be a responsible adult. Some of the methods, I had borrowed some money from her one time and I was living on my own, and she said, well, where's the $50 or $25 you're supposed to pay me for your truck since I bought it for you? And I said, well, I only have $25. And she says, I don't care. And I gave her the $25. No, don't ask me what I did the rest of the month to eat. I know I survived because I'm here. But those were the things that I realize now were so loving, because it's made me who I am. I'm responsible. I pay my bills on time. I have the grace of knowing that I own my own home, that we have enough Social Security to buy groceries for Louise and I. And that's because my mother loved me in a way that I never understood, really, truly, until I started doing this and talking to my brother to prepare for this talk. I had tried to come together, but I hadn't really got to that place of being able to tell you, each and every one of you, that my mom loved me wholly and completely, the very best she could. And that's an extraordinary thing. To be loved so well by somebody who was so, I don't want to say broken, but so void of some of the things that I got from her that she never got from anybody else in her life. So That's my story about mothers. So what I'd like to do now is do a meditation. And if you would all get comfortable in your chairs. And if you can, try to visualize your mother either sitting next to you, or if you're so lucky as I was to be able to see her sitting on your lap and rocking her and filling yourself and her with love. So let us take a couple deep breaths together. One more, please. See your moms, whether they're here, still present with us, or have made their transition. See them in their fullness. See the divinity within them. See that they are truly an aspect of the Divine Mother. The all-loving goodness of God. Hear them softly whispering in your ear with their hand on your heart. I love you. For you are truly the beloved of my heart. Hear her say to you, you are whole, perfect. No one can ever take you from my love for you. Take a deep breath in. and out. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Let your mother leave. She will always be there for you anytime you choose to rest in her arms. Now, please open your eyes. Thank you for letting me share my mother with you. It's a great privilege. Namaste. What? We're gonna sing the. No, we're gonna sing the prayer of protection first. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Thank you. So let's say this together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Now let us stand and sing our peace song.